Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Tea Time. My name is Rob, and we have a few presenters today, and we'd like to go ahead and get started. First off, we want to have Kevin Smith presenting, and then Paul Bissex. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get this started, and thank you for joining us. So,
Okay, great. So am I good to go?
you're good to go, and once you share your screen, I think that will be the last step you'll need to do.
All right, let's do it. All right, so I'm just going to give a short presentation on iterators in ES6. So that's the next version of JavaScript that's kind of wrapping up now. JavaScript currently does not have a user configurable protocol for iteration. It has some things built in, but they're not very good. They kind of suck. So let's continue. Okay, so currently JavaScript has a for-in statement. What that does is it loops over the innumerable property names that exist on the object or on any parent of the object on the object's prototype chain. So that's kind of complicated. Properties can be either enumerable or non-enumerable, and it's kind of a pain to describe, but we're just going to leave it at that and move on. So this is an example of using the for-in statement. We have a list with 3 elements, and then we use the for-in statement to loop over the property names of that object. And you can see what we get is the names of the keys defined on this list. So in this case, it's 0, 1, and 2 since it's an array. And we can also use the for-in statement to loop over objects, over the property names defined on an object. So here we have an object with property names A, B, and C. And when we loop over that, we get the property name. So that's fine. That seems kind of useful, right? But not really. So for-in kind of sucks. First of all, it loops over the keys on an object and not anything else. So sometimes we want to loop over the keys, but not always. Like for arrays, for instance, we're generally not interested in the index of the array as much as the actual element at that index. And there are other more subtle problems with it. So in JavaScript, an array with holes is it's like a regular array, except that instead of pushing items onto it and having a sequence of items, you've got an item at a certain location, and then way down the line of indexes, you have another item, and those segments in between are called holes. So in this example, I create a list with 1 element, and then I set the element at index 10 to be the string B. So when I do a for-in iteration over that array, I get 0 and 10, which seems very odd. And generally that's not what we're intending to do with the loop. So similarly, if I have an array, like any JavaScript object, I can attach arbitrary properties to that object. So here I've defined an array, and I'm attaching a property named foo to it. So when I do an enumeration, a for-in enumeration over that array, well, I get foo back in the list. So that's not at all what we're interested in. And finally, for-in is not user customizable. So you can't create your own abstractions and define your own ways of iterating over objects. In ES6, there's a new statement. It's called the for-of statement. So here's an example we can look at. We have a list. We have an array with 3 elements, and then we execute a for-of statement that loops over that array, and we can see that it's actually outputting the values of that array, which is what we want. Yay. Here's another example. Map is a new data type in ES6. So here I'm creating a map, and I'm setting some keys and values in that map. So here's a map with an element index at foo and at bar. And when I do a for-of loop over that map, I get entries. Now entries are, they come out as an array with the key as element 0 and the value as element number 1. So that's what we want. That's good. So iteration is it's flexible too. Now, in the case of a map, sometimes we'll want to get out the key value pairs, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just want the keys, or sometimes we just want the values. So in this example, I'm just iterating over the keys. So there's a method defined on the built-in map class called keys, and that returns an iterator over the keys of map. Iteration is also configurable. So when you define your own classes in ES6, you can define how you want the for statement or other language constructs to iterate over that object. So in this case, I have a class named myClass, and when I construct an instance of this class, I'm creating a map, basically, and when I do a for-of loop over an instance of this myClass, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to defer to the iterator for the values of that map. So and we could do any kind of iteration we want using this hook. So this is a language level hook. Instead of in Python, I guess you have double underscore whatever followed by double underscore to do hook kind of things like this. In ES6 we have symbols. So what is a symbol? A symbol is a new primitive type in ES6. They're unique and unguessable. Strings as opposed to strings, which are guessable. So you can guess all the strings of length in, you can just iterate over all the possibilities. But the most important thing is that they can be used as object property names, and they're used for these language level hooks. Symbol.iterator is one of the new hooks, but there are a few others. It's definitely the most important though. So when you use symbol.iterator to define your own iterator for an object, what does it return? Well, it needs to return an iterator. An iterator needs to have a next method, and the next method needs to return iterator results. And an iterator result has to have a value and a done field. The value is just whatever the next sequence element is, and done just indicates whether the sequence is finished or not. One of the easiest ways to create iterators is using generators. I'm not going to go over this in detail. It's just kind of a preview. But just like Python has generator functions, ES6 also has generator functions. It uses this new syntax, function star syntax. Whereas in Python it's implicit. If you have a yield statement, a yield expression or whatever, then it'll automatically be generator function. But in ES6 you have to use function star. So you can see here I've defined a generator function, and then
Hey, Kevin, are you still speaking? We can't hear anything. Paul, how about you? Can you hear anything or?
I'm not hearing Kevin anymore. He just dropped out.
Oh, okay. Looks like he's still on the call, but I don't see any audio coming from him. So I guess we'll give him a minute to see if he comes back. Oh, there we go. I'll let him know in IRC that he dropped off in tea time. Hey, Paul, could you please join tea time as well? Pound tea time. We're just kind of all chatting in there as well. They might ask you some questions. So. All right, I just let Kevin know we can't hear him anymore, so we'll give him a minute. Maybe he can drop off and just come back.
Oh, actually, I'm done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was quick.
Oh, you were so you were basically done. You didn't necessarily drop off or anything.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So I'm looking through the Tea Time channel, and oh, someone's asking about ES6. Does it have classes? And map, can we compile Python to ES6? Aaron is asking that question. So yeah, Kevin just basically replied in IRC. Probably there's probably a project out there already. All right, well thanks so much, Kevin, for that. That's very interesting stuff. It seems powerful, and I mean, it almost seems like no limits to what you could do with that. It's a lot of. When I saw a lot of the generated functions and the map functions, I was thinking, oh my gosh, you could do this in Python as well. So that's pretty awesome stuff. Looking forward to that. I want to go ahead at this time, if there are no more questions. But if you have more questions, just post them in pound tea time. And with that said, we'll go ahead and move to Paul Bizex.
All right, so let me fire up screen sharing here.
All right, and we hear you fine, Paul.
Great. Okay. So get this started up. Pardon my delay. All right, so sorry, I'm shuffling windows here, trying to keep my notes and the Hangout accessible. Okay, so Hangouts, let's share screen again, share that, share it.
Hey, while Paul is getting set up, I just want to say that, oh, that looks nice. Your screen came up.
Cool.
So you are sharing your screen right now, so I'll go ahead and let you do that. And if anyone has anything they want to present, like last minute, just let me know because we have plenty of time left. All right, Paul, go ahead and take it away.
Great. So I wanted to do this this talk for a while. I started at CMG in 2011, and I used my personal machine, which at that point was a pretty new MacBook Air, for the next 3 years, and then I started running out of SSD space and figured it was about time to enjoy some company hardware, so I ordered myself up a nice Dell Latitude E7240 from Perry and installed Ubuntu 14.04 on it because I wanted this to be, this seemed like my opportunity to try actually having Linux be my day-to-day work environment. And just to give you some context, I'm a long-time Mac user for sure. Where's my little? Oh, there we go. I'm not in this picture, but I first saw the Mac when I was a junior in high school in 1984, and I visited Dartmouth College, where they had all incoming freshmen buy Macs. They cut a deal with Apple, and for $1,000, everybody got a brand new, state-of-the-art 1984 Macintosh with 128K RAM and a 3.5-inch floppy disk drive and all the good stuff, Mac Write, Mac Paint. Anyway, I saw it, and it blew my mind because I'd been hacking away on my 8-bit PRS-80 at home. And that didn't really leave me after college. The first place I went after I graduated and moved was a resume, basically a sort of desktop publishing shop. This is in the early 90s, inside of Kinko's to print my resume. And by the time I was finished printing my resume, I was offered a job there and worked there the next year learning about Quark Express and PageMaker and Photoshop and all these other things. And that pretty much cemented my Macintosh blood, and so that led into a career in graphic design and magazine design. And it was only when my graphic design career led me to web design that I remembered all my programming stuff I had done. In college, I had sort of played with a lot of different software stuff and thought, you know, this web stuff is pretty tedious. I bet you could automate some of it. And so that what got me into web development. But the whole time I was a Mac user. I've never been a Windows user, so my experience is maybe a little unusual. Like I've never owned a Windows machine or used it for day-to-day work at all. I do notice that in the Linux world, there's a funny sort of cargo cult around the Mac UI. This is a screenshot of a dock, basically a sort of clone of the Apple dock in OS X. And I have to admit to a kind of snarky attitude toward these things because they often are about the sort of the glitz, but it falls short if the entire UI isn't really designed to carry through the ideas. So there's that, and then there's things like getting your getting your hardware to run now a free version of the OS, but up until now illegal copies of the OS. Anyway, that's sort of a side note. The last time I tried this kind of experiment was about 10 years ago when my PowerBook that I was using for work died, and I had just bought a desktop PC at a yard sale for like $60 and had installed FreeBSD and KDE on it just for fun to sort of play with that stuff, and that immediately became my main work computer for the next 6 weeks. I was self-employed and I was doing web stuff. And so I played around with it, and I did a long write-up afterwards because it was a very interesting experience. It wasn't by choice, but I learned a lot of stuff and sort of formed a lot of opinions about what was there that I didn't know about and what was lacking. This screenshot shows one of the features that I was really kind of envious of, which was you could just paste some text into a file dialog or into a file window, and you'd be asked for a file name to contain it, which I thought was a nice, seamless adaptation of that kind of natural reflex. I want to put this content here, and you figure it out. So switching platforms then and now, it highlights things you take for granted for sure. Even little things like double-clicking on a word and then dragging across text. On a Mac, that everywhere you are, that will select by word, and every time you cross another word boundary, it will add one more word to the selection. In my experience here in Ubuntu 14.04, many apps do that, some don't, and it's jarring to sort of have to remember or develop conservative habits because you can't be sure that the sort of UI conventions are consistent across applications. On the other hand, I had my aggravations with Apple over the years, and so it's been fun to just sort of jump into a new platform entirely. and it includes some fun stuff like this is I mentioned this to some folks in the club channel, but I discovered there's an Emacs package that can fetch and edit and basically can talk to the Confluence server via there's an XML RPC interface and edit Confluence pages. So you never have to use the Confluence UI, and it even has various commands for dealing with formatting, so you don't have to remember as much of the nutty Confluence markup syntax. So this is just a shot of a Confluence page on the top and my Emacs window below that I opened. I have them side by side, but I didn't have to pull up the Confluence page at all to get to the Emacs window. I did all through Emacs, although you can. There's another Chrome plugin that I got that adds an edit in Emacs button to every text area in a web page, which is actually handy for things that are long form. And it's kind of, that one's funny because that little edit button also shows up on my OS X machine where I've got the same Chrome login and doesn't do anything at all. It shows up, but it can't do it. So that's one of those things where it's foregrounded that the sort of capabilities don't overlap in certain areas, and that it's not always just like poor old Linux can't do certain things that my amazing proprietary OS can do. It's the other way in that case for sure. So I got a hoot out of Confluence mode and have used that a lot. I did not have, I've used Time Machine for my backups on my OS X machine. I haven't explored backup space very deeply, but I'm using the built-in backup provision in Ubuntu, and that uses DejaDupe and Duplicity, and I'm using as my target my home directory on VCS. So I peel out the VirtualBox images and stuff that's gigantic, but basically I'm getting hourly and daily backups to the cloud, as it were, from my machine here. This is something I hat tip to Matt Simpson for this. One of the conundrums that I was facing was, what do I do with all of my keychains and all my passwords and other stuff that's stored in the OS X keychain? There are lots of cross-platform password managers, and I wasn't using any of them because OS X keychain was just swell for me. But I needed something, and I wasn't too gung-ho on something, learning another web UI and getting in somebody's freemium model and whatever. And Matt Simpson turned me on to this, which is called Pass, and it's multi-platform. So I've got installed it on my OS X machine as well, and uses GPG encryption to store all your stuff. It has a very sensible interface and Git integration. So I've actually got a branch for my personal stuff and a branch for my work stuff, and it's all working. It's on my multiple machines, and it's been a great sort of lifeboat for that thing. When I started this process, I didn't really have any idea how I was going to handle that. And as you know, we accumulate a lot of passwords and logins in our work, and so it was very nice to have this solution just come up and be really sort of clean and more or less exactly what I wanted. And then finally, this is my last little slide. One of the things that makes my life livable on OS X is something called LaunchBar. If you use Alfred or Quicksilver, they do very similar things. It's sort of keyboard drive for all the things that the OS doesn't give you good keyboard control over, including simple things like launching, which there are lots of ways to do, but also things like taking a file and sending it to a particular application or moving it somewhere, or a lot of stuff that in some cases you can do almost as quickly in the shell, but it really takes it up a notch and is always there regardless of whether you're in a terminal or not. And GNOME Do is what I found to be the best sort of substitute for that. It still lacks certain things, but most of it is adjustment in terms of different UI decisions they made. So that has been an important piece of my migration, because my fingers are hardwired to hit the LaunchBar keyboard shortcut when I need to do Google search or find a particular file in the massive tree of medley files, or similar kind of things that I don't want to mouse around for because I hate the mouse. So that's in terms of. So those are some of the high points of what's different, what I discovered. it's a little challenging having to slow down and think about things like what modifier key I'm pressing and stuff like that. But it has not been a bumpy ride at all, and I'm perfectly settled now. And I should be clear that my OS 10 machine is still my personal machine. It just sits at home now and not in my little office here. And my work is now 100% on Linux, and it has not been a hurdle. I was even able to use my time reporting on the internet by spoofing Chrome to pretend it was Safari, which was the only browser it was able to work on under OS 10 anyway. So so far so good, and that is enough from me on my switch to Linux from OS 10. Any questions?
Alrighty. Thank you, Paul, for that. That was insightful. If you have any questions, Paul Bessix is in Pound Tea Time, and you can conversate with him. We still have some time left, so I'm going to go ahead and do a talk that I've kind of done yesterday. It's related to how to implement ads. And when I go through this talk, you won't see any slides or anything. I actually kind of encourage this, like, if you have time to prepare a talk, that's good, you have slides, but you might not have time, and you can just kind of do it off the wall, like I'm going to do this talk. So the first thing I want to do is share my screen and show you what I'm talking about. So share screen, and I want to show you a page with some ads in it. So this is Tide 3, and this is kind of where we're building the new JP2 redesign. We're totally redesigning ajc.com, and it's supposed to go live October 15th, which is pretty awesome. So you see all these ads here. Here's a wallpaper ad at the top. Here's an 88 by 38 ad. So many ads, and they're green like this because they're flighted that way. They were created that way, and that's the only reason they're green. But if you want to know, like, if you look at a page like this and you want to know, have an idea of all of the ad tags in the code, you can simply view source. And you might get stuck in a position where you're troubleshooting ads one day, and you scroll down to the bottom, and there's this helpful piece of JavaScript called Agility tags, and you'll see begin ad logs. It's always at the bottom of the page. And you'll see on, I'll make this bigger, on line 1037, you'll see, I just got a ping, so maybe someone's telling me they can't hear me, so I should probably check this message. Your screen is still minimized. Okay, thanks, Mason. How about now? Can you guys see that okay? I'm just going to assume that you can.
Good.
Keep going. Okay, perfect. So on line 1037, you'll see something called ad slots, and all of these slots right here, they represent an ad, a place in the page for an ad, and that's kind of how we identify them. We call them ad slots, and they're all configured in the admin. I think I have enough time to show you that too. So Agility parses through the code, and it says, what ads do I need to display for this page? And it displays them right here. So now if we go to 1041, we'll see those ads again, and we'll see the ad sizes that correspond to these ad slots. This is configured in the admin, in the Agility tool. So for each ad slot, there's an ad size, and there's a breakpoint. And for us, we're just programming for one breakpoint, and that's full screen resolution, because the redesign isn't responsive. So if you see 0px-infinity, that means don't worry about a breakpoint. We just have one ad size, pretty much. And if you see, you might see a case where you'll see the ad slot on the first set of lines, but you won't see them in the bottom set. And that means that you just don't have that ad slot configured in the database. So if I were to go and see where these ad slots were configured, I'd go to Agility. And I want to look at all of the ad slots for Atlanta CMG site. And you see that's 2010, site ID 2010 for Atlanta CMG site. And these are all of the new ad slots we've created for the Atlanta CMG site. So this is all the configuration that's needed as far as Metli is concerned for ads. And if you click on one of the ad slots, you'll see it has a name and it has a site associated with it. Ad unit code is a field that's used by DFP and it's associated with the inventory of the ad. You may see this field filled out, or you may see it blank, but it's relevant to DFP. But all Metli cares about is this ad label and which site it's associated with and the ad size. Once it finds that information, it knows how to input it into source once it finds the DFP Agility tag. And it just puts this in the page source and with the respective divs as well. So if I were to find out what ad slot corresponds to an ad on a page, you see 88 by 31, but what ad slot is it? How big is it? You can inspect the element, and then you can you see all of this HTML that comes from DFP. That's double click for publishers. That's what people flighting ads use to flight ads. It's Google's solution for flighting ads, and you'll see the ad slot name. So this is NPR 01, and my page just awesomely refreshed. So I'm going back to it. Inspect element. All right. So back where I started, you'll see the ad slot name, and then you'll see how big the ad is. You'll see a width of 88 and by 31. So that kind of gives you an idea. Hey, I want to find out what the ad slot is for this ad. I want to find out the dimensions. You inspect it, and you see. Agility, all that does is once it finds the ad slot in the database, and Metli, it just outputs a div, and then DFP just fills that div with all of this fun iframe ad code that you see here. This is all coming from DFP. And if I collapse this div, you'll see that you actually see what Agility outputs. And Agility is a solution built here that interfaces with DFP. It's kind of like the gateway that we use. It's the ad library that we use to handle ads. So you might wonder at this point what the code looks like. So I put some documentation on the internet about ads and called it JP2 ads. And there was a training video that I had yesterday, and I recorded it and I put it here too. So the only code you need for ads is you just need this load agility underscore tags. That's the library for agility. And what was Michael's last name? It wasn't Agility, but it was something similar. Angeletti, that was it. Michael Angeletti. This library was named after him, so it was built in-house. And he just kind of slightly modified what it was called. So that loads it, and then in the templates you would just do this line here, DFP underscore ad, and you give it the ad slot name. So if you're developing this and you want to find out from the business what you need for ads, you ask them what the ad slot name is and the dimensions, and that's all you need to code. And then you can just go in your code and reference that ad slot name and go in the ad slot model and set up the ad slot and give it an ad size, save, and you're done with the setup and the code. So that's the simplicity of using ads. And this, like I mentioned, this is the breakpoint. So all of this information is put into the code by Agility. So if I go back to view source, you'll see it here. So Agility looks at your code and says, okay, that's the ad size. These are the dimensions. It gets this from looking that up in the AdSlot Metli database, and it gets this from either the code. Oh no, it probably uses that as a key to look it up in the database, because you also define that here, so it gets it from the database. And mind you, this gets really fun when the ads are responsive, because you might have various sizes of ads depending on the breakpoint or the screen resolution. So for example, this might be, you might have a 728 by 90 ad at full screen resolution, but when you resize the window to something like, I don't know, about half the size. This is the closest thing I can find to about half the size. Once you resize to like 480, then you might want a smaller ad, maybe about half of that. So this is 320 by 50 is the closest I can find to half of 728 by 90. So at 480, give me this ad size, and you can keep going smaller from there. And that's what we did for the premium sites. If you go to myjc.com, you'll see that we have various ad sizes for one ad slot. That's because
Are those breakpoints hard set? Any way to make them custom?
Custom, what do you mean? Oh, actually, that is
There's a dynamic.
Yeah, there's a dynamic entry, and this one says I don't want to use breakpoints, but I wonder, I don't see an option to add breakpoints here.
Well,
Maybe
dynamic? That lets you enter something?
no.
I guess.
Yeah, this probably comes from another model, but actually we can see. Let's see. That's a good question.
I don't want to sidetrack.
No, this is a good question. Ad sizes. Okay, so that's in the code. Yeah, that's coming from the code. So I guess at some point there was a decision made that these are the screen resolutions that we will support for responsive designs, and it's okay to hard code them. But as far as the ad sizes, you can definitely add those.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can go here and start adding ad sizes. I was wondering why the plus sign was on the side like that, but I had to make the screen a little smaller. So yeah, you can add a width or height for the ad size. And I think that's it basically on ads. So just look up JP2 ads, and you'll see the page related to this. And just let me know if you have any questions. And I have all of this good information here. And I'm getting pinged in IRC, so I'll go ahead and answer those. Okay, awesome. No, this is awesome because I can go ahead and answer questions right now. He said, John Robinson says so many pings are in
Just go one by one. It's like a break.
Okay. I'll just follow up with you guys in IRC tea time. We're pretty much conversating there. And I'll go ahead and take us offline because we are on air right now. And I'm going to stop the broadcast. So everyone, thanks for the tea time. I just showed you how to do some type of informal demo. So don't let the formality of a demo hold you up. You don't need slides or anything. Just pull up a web page and talk about it. So thanks to our presenters today, Paul and Kevin, who presented some awesome information, and we look forward to hearing from you guys in the future. So enjoy your weekend and take care.